Well, good morning, Springfield Faith Center, and welcome to the podcast Without Walls. And really excited to be here. I'm Daniel. I am the associate pastor here at SFC, and joining me today are my co-hosts.
My name is Brandon. I'm the senior pastor here at Springfield Faith Center, and to my right,
I'm Tony. I'm the youth pastor here at Springfield Faith Center.
Cool.
All right. Episode 5.
It is episode 5.
It's been a long journey. There's some blood, sweat, and tears.
We are making our way through this thing. This is fun.
Yeah, I enjoy it. No, it's great.
Yeah, and
can't believe it's actually been 5 weeks already.
I know. It is kind of amazing.
I wasn't here for one of them, so it's only been 4 weeks for me. But
yeah, you haven't reached veteran status yet, like Brandon and I have.
He has his own podcast though, so he's kind of like, this is
true.
Like changing.
This is like
leagues.
my side hustle. My side hustle podcast.
Nice.
No, that's a joke.
All right, so we usually start off by doing the Beyond Sunday segment, where we take the message from the last weekend and we kind of continue the conversation. So I had the privilege of preaching this last weekend and sharing out of the end of Philippians chapter 3. So I will throw the questions to the two of you guys. Brandon and Tony, what stood out to you? What was notable?
Yeah, so I think the thing that stood out most to me was how, as you were talking about the passage sounding arrogant at first, and where Paul is like, all right, just follow me, follow my example, imitate me. And yeah, at first it's like, wow, that is kind of arrogant for someone to say, just follow my example. But then you brought it to light, and I was thinking about this last night actually, and when you said actual true arrogance is saying, I don't need someone to follow. And to me, I think that stood out. I think sometimes in life and in ministry, we've maybe gone to a certain place where we're like, hey, you know what? I've arrived. I've gotten there. And it's funny because the last week he says it's not like I've arrived there yet.
Yeah.
So follow me as I'm like pressing forward, straining forward. So yeah, it was a good word, and what really stood out again was that true arrogance is saying I don't need anyone to follow.
Yeah.
That's really what stood out to me.
Yeah, I mean that stood out to me too, and it made me think about first it sounds arrogant and like a exaggerated sense of self to say like follow me as I follow Christ.
Right.
But then as you said that, at first I was like, yeah, that does kind of sound arrogant. I don't think I could say that. And then I was thinking about, well, then how dare I be in Christian leadership
Exactly.
if I can't say that?
Yeah.
Like, why would I ever dream of like trying to lead people in the way of Jesus if I wasn't able to say that I am also actively pursuing the way of Jesus myself? And so that really kind of hit home.
I just had a thought, but I'll save it until the end where we go on to what would I add if I had more time, because it belongs there. So, all right. So the second question is, was there anything challenging? What possibly challenged you?
Yeah. The question at the end was, who am I modeling my life after? As we're getting to know like our new pastor Brandon, and we had that year of not really having a lead pastor, not really having someone to follow, was just kind of making it up as we go and trying to survive. And I maybe kind of take inventory, not just of who am I intentionally following, but who am I unintentionally following?
Right.
Like what are the voices, whether it's on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or a podcast or a book that I'm reading that like I consistently see myself flocking towards, and is that voice leading me to a more Christ-like end?
Right.
And, so it made me take inventory of who are the people that like I'm intentionally saying, like when Brandon got here, like I resolved before he got here, like whoever our new pastor is going to be, like I'm going to do my best to take on his yoke and and follow him. So like there's the intentionality in that area, but then there's the other intentionality of like weeding out the voices that are forming my life that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing too, and I saw in that passage, Paul will kind of say, these are the people I told you not to follow, and you should follow me. I just mentioned my whole pedigree and what I did, and even though I, had this whole list of achievements, I actually consider them garbage. And compared to following Christ and knowing Christ, and then he says, there's different voices, there's different people you can imitate. And to me, and I was writing it down, is the ones that he calls the enemies of the cross of Christ. They're the ones who their end is destruction. Like, we think of everyone we listen to, all the voices that we listen to, the influencers, think of social media or who we're following. That language is interesting, right? Like on social media, are you following this person? And Jesus calls people to follow him. And so in a way, as you're listening, as you're ingesting, as you're taking in what they're saying, all the content, it's like, no, in a way, I am following them. I become their disciple. And Paul warns us clearly of if the person that you're listening to or following, if their end is destruction, you need to get away from that person and cut that voice out. And then he says, basically, the end for someone who follows Christ is transformation.
Right.
So the end of someone who is an enemy of the cross is destruction. Their God is the belly, like the things that they desire, that's their God. But when you follow Christ, like your end is transformation. God will transform your body of humiliation and make it glorious like Christ's body.
Yeah.
And so for me, it got me thinking of what is the end game? What's the unto? One of my friends in ministry used to say, what's the unto? Is the unto of that voice or that influencer, if it isn't unto Christ or unto deeper Christ likeness or transformation, then it shouldn't be someone I listen to. So like you said, an inventory, but really listening to those two things. Does it lead to destruction or does it lead to transformation?
Yeah.
The New York Times, I posted this on my Facebook, so if you're friends with me on Facebook, check it out. They wrote an article about the impact of having your life formed by social media influencers, and the article's called like Deconstructing the Church of Instagram or something like that.
Nice.
And it's really, and the person who wrote it's not a Christian, but like she talks about how like the new like dogma of like secular millennials is like far left politics and Dolly Parton, and like she gives this list of things of like this is what non-Christian millennials are really, really into. And no matter how much we keep returning to the social media influences of like Glennon Doyle and Brene Brown, we're still miserable and we're still outraged. And it's because they're not influencing us in a way towards life. And to see somebody who's not a Christian be like, maybe I need to go back to church. And that's her conclusion at the end of the article is like, I think I need church. I think I need somebody to influence me in a way that forces me to ask questions that are uncomfortable, that these influencers are just tickling my ears towards. And anyways, that ties in with what you were talking about is just like what, and it was interesting reading that right after your message of like, oh man.
Interesting,
Yeah. Just fascinating correlation there.
Well, it's I think it's interesting how Paul's pretty blunt and pretty clear of like following Christ leads to the humiliation, but the humiliation in the form of Jesus, who was in the form of God, not considering equality with God something to be used to his own advantage, emptied himself and goes all the way to death on the cross. But that is not the end.
Right.
The end then is, well, because of obedience to Christ, because you're not an enemy of the cross of Christ, but you're transformed by the cross of Christ, you're a friend of God, you actually get resurrection, transformation. Right. And so the humiliation isn't the end. And he's pretty clear about that. Following Christ leads to this, but that's not the end. It then goes to the next place. And so he's saying, look, there's hope. I've shared all that, like kind of like that downward spiral, but God will transform our lowly bodies, our humble bodies, our body of humiliation. And that's became a key text in resurrection language of like actually means our mortal bodies, when they die, they will actually be raised and transformed when Christ returns. And so there is a glorious future for those who are in Christ.
Yeah.
That's a conversation didn't expect to, but that's a conversation I've had a couple of times this last year with my kids because my dad passed away this last year, and they've asked like, what is it like for him now? What does that look like? And so we've had conversations about the promises of Scripture that God is going to give us new bodies on the other side of this. So,
but I think it's a great challenge. The word you gave of, who's worth imitating? I think that question, who's worth imitating? And when you find that person, imitate them. Like I think you said, steal the best from them.
Yeah.
And I think I've been in places, I think my last pastor said, beg, borrow, and steal. And you got to beg, borrow, and steal.
Yeah.
And it's like, we do that in other things. Why not do that with people who are followers of Christ, who we admire, we look up to? I mean, there's things in you guys that I look up to, and rather than just highlight them and go, oh, that's great of them, I need to go, how do I get that in my life? How do I implement that in my life and imitate people who follow Christ?
And I think if we can move on to the the what would I add
what would you add?
Conversation, because that leads right into it, is that because there is, I think, I have to assume we do this in more places than just in church life, but I especially see it in church life. There's this confusion sometimes, I think, where we assume that in order for a person to be worth mimicking, worth copying, there can't be anything wrong with that person's life. They have to be perfect in order to be good enough for me. And like I said, I have to assume that we do that in more places than just in the church with spirituality, but we definitely do it here.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, part of the story of the modern church in the West is the story of, includes stories of public moral failings on the part of pastors. That is a thing, unfortunately, that happens. And I don't know anybody who's cheering for that and wanting to see more of it. But the question then gets raised, does that mean that there was nothing about their lives worth emulating? You know, and Tony, you said a minute ago, if I, as a pastor, ideally I should be able to put myself forward and say, yes, copy the best of me. But at the same time, what happens when people visibly see my limitations and the evidence of my smallness and my humanness, because it's certainly there. And there is a tendency for people to, in the church, to say, if I'm going to pattern my life after so-and-so, they had better be perfect.
Yeah.
There had better not be anything wrong in what they do. And that's a dangerous game to play because it forces people to be something other than human. It forces people to be something different. We've got to balance those two things where we recognize there are going to be things about some person's life that are worth emulating, that are worth borrowing, and there are going to be some things about that person's life that are better left alone, that are not worth copying and emulating. And that's going to be true of everybody to one degree or another. And I think if I had had more time, I would have gone into that and sort of forced people to wrestle with some questions. Because how many times have you heard a story like that where I loved so-and-so until I found out this about them, and then they were dead to me? Some variation on that. We laugh sometimes because, Tony, you and I have a mutual friend who hates Tom Brady because he has a perspective on Tom Brady's history and some of the choices that he's made and things like that. And because of those choices, he discounts everything about his athletic career and says, no, I refuse to appreciate or, support
Even though
this.
he is the Michael Jordan of football.
Even though he is the Michael Jordan of football, yeah. And very few people are arguing that now, especially after this last year.
Yep.
But it's that kind of, like, I don't know what else to call it, like an all or nothing mentality in this. And we've got to be able to distinguish between those and say, you know what, this person has this thing that is really great and that is worth copying, and they've got all this other stuff that is probably not worth copying.
A lot of babies turn out with a lot of bathwater.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, in an American context, everything has become like celebrity, right? Like they're up there, they're up in front of us, they're above us, they have it all together. And Paul's like, this is the church he's writing to, and the people knew that he was flogged in that town. He was stripped, he was beaten, he was thrown into prison, and he's saying, imitate me. I wonder how many people are like, yeah, I don't really know if I want to sign up for that kind of imitation.
Yeah.
But this wasn't, like, I think we even glamorized the Apostle Paul.
Of course.
To the point where it's like, this is Paul, and it's like Jesus Paul, and you're like, oh, like, he was, the best apostle. He wrote a lot of the New Testament. Yeah, he has a lot of, but he's also the one to say, like, in my weakness, Christ is strong. I have a thorn in my flesh. Like, he's very real about himself, and he would not want a pedestal. He would only want Christ to be on a pedestal or to be exalted. And so the imitating then should probably be the ones who are the people who we probably would think the least, like the person we would think we would want to imitate the least, because they're probably not in the spotlight. They're probably not getting recognition. They're probably someone who just, grinds faithfully and humbly, and probably in the Word every day, and praying for people, showing up, never wanting to be in the front. I mean, those are like, I mean, Paul contended because that was his gift, but he also he was, again, stripped, beaten,
right,
and severely flogged, thrown in prison several times, and he's like, imitate that. And they're, I think sometimes we glamorize Paul to an extent where we're like, I can never be like Paul, but. Yeah. Maybe he wasn't very glamorous. So when I said that from the pulpit sometimes, like, when Jesus says, you will be my witnesses, witness, the same word in Greek, we get the same as a root word, the same word we get martyr. And I'm like, does that mean Christ says we might die for our faith? And I'm like, well, maybe.
Maybe.
I mean, they all did following that in Acts, and
Yeah.
I don't know how we got there in the talking. Other than imitating Christ isn't just, preaching great sermons and having a podcast or being able to play a guitar. It's the one who's faithful always, the one who's humble, the one who loves, the one who serves. That's what it means to imitate.
Well, and it echoes that process that you were describing earlier, that so much of the Christian story is marked by this down and up kind of process, that there is a death that happens before the life happens. And that is all over the pages of Scripture, that the process that Christ himself laid out, going to the cross before the glory set before him, is part of the process for all of us, is part of life for all of us. We're not doing people any favors if we cut that part out of the Christian story and don't make them aware. Yeah, guys, look, the valley of the shadow of death happens first, and then after that comes the dwelling in the house of the Lord forever.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit. Brandon, you got to have some meetings this week where you were getting brought up to speed with sort of the international missional life of Springfield Faith Center. I'd love to hear what you learned and like what was kind of like your exposure to that.
Yeah, so really in the last 2 weeks, I've met with our missions council, a group of people who have a heart for global missions and a heart for serving the Lord and being a part of what God is doing all over the world, whether it's Southeast Asia, whether it's Kazakhstan, different places really, and Eastern Asia too as well. And so I got a chance to meet with the council, really a group of people who wants to set the purpose for how we connect as our local church body to our missionaries abroad. So we're going to have further meetings to discuss kind of how we can better partner with the missions team. I found out we used to highlight missions every weekend or once a month.
Once a month, yeah.
We did a missions highlight, and so we're going to be bringing back in those highlights and kind of marking out our church as a church that's interested in actually operating in global missions in some level. So it was really encouraging to meet the group of people there. And then last week I got a chance to connect with City of Refuge International, and I was really interested in that because when I pulled in to the driveway this weekend here at the church campus, there's a couple trucks set up to the right and some pop-up tents, and it says, cans for the children. And I'd seen that before and didn't really know what it was. And so I got to have a chance to talk with Richard and Lorene, and so it was really cool. If you have, and this is what I found out, I said, I'll be a sponge right now. Throw all the information you can at me. And they were gracious not to give too much, so I would be swimming. But it's really cool. They actually want to do something, and they want to lift poverty, and they think the best way to do that is education. And so the money that's brought in, as you turn in your cans, you can recycle your cans right here in the parking lot. They take them and they turn them in. They get the cash from that, and they use that cash to go right to the students in, I believe it's Congo,
The Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa.
Democratic Republic of Congo. And so they've seen hundreds of people go through the process. I got a chance to see in some of their literature, just seeing pictures of people who have been impacted because of just donating cans. We buy soda and other cans, and we need to recycle them here. We that's kind of a part of what American culture is. So, you take that, you can give it, and then it goes straight there. Yeah. And it was interesting too. Part of that is they also put in water wells. And just the amount of waterborne sicknesses that drop just because they put in clean water. I mean, it's something I think we take for granted a lot here. I know that sometimes, brush your teeth with running water. Like, we take for granted that is clean water that's just going right down the drain. And that yet in these villages and these people groups, when they get this water, like, they can actually have clean water to drink. And then the sicknesses go down. Yeah. And it's cool that we can do something as little as dropping off a can, some glass, the recyclables. And then I don't know if it's glass. I don't want to be quoting that. I know it's cans for sure, but I know
that's a good question.
I know if you turn in your recyclable cans, then that little thing, a small thing here locally, has a global impact. and we have connections with people who do that. So I was really encouraged to do that.
That's awesome.
And I know that you have, Daniel, a little bit more history with that organization.
I do, yeah. I could talk ad nauseum, I'm sure. But I got to be on the board of directors of City of Refuge for a couple of years. I had a chance early on to travel to the Congo with Richard and John and a team of people, and to go there and just meet the folks who were living there. And really, the City of Refuge was born out of Richard's heart. Richard's a local from the Congo initially who came here through a crazy story. And
Yeah, he was telling me part of it.
Yeah, it's bananas. He's a really cool guy. But he had a huge heart because the Congo has a lot of orphans because of the history of civil war and the violence and things like that. The major cities are filled with thousands of orphans. And so he wanted to create not a standard orphanage, but really what it is kind of a supported in-home foster care network is kind of how it functions, where the families are really well supported and there's a lot of good oversight and things like that. But these orphans are given a place to live in the context of a family.
Yeah.
And they're raised and an opportunity to be in health. I don't know what the current numbers are right now, but the last I checked with them, I think they had 120 orphans that were in the program at that point. But then the cans that go to the school program are on top of and beyond that. Those finances are made available to those students, but others like them who want to go to school but don't have the money because they don't have public education there. Every student has to be able to pay in order to go. And by our standards, it's not much, but by their standards, of course, it's a significant barrier.
Yeah, they're
to getting
saying
involved in
something
school.
like $25 a year gives them the resources and pays. And I'm like, wow, for students to... For kids to be able to go to school, and seeing the pictures of someone entering the program and now as like went through past all of his medical
They've got college
boards,
graduates out of the program
doctor,
now,
like doctor of medicine and all that. So I was really encouraged by what they're doing there.
Yeah, it's a cool story. So they have a website, City of Refuge International. If you're interested, and you can go check it out, or you can contact the church and we can give you more information, put you in contact if you want. Yeah,
and we also accept cans throughout the week. Doesn't just have to be on that Sunday morning, but if you wanted to drop them off, you can drop them off. Here at the church campus, we have a little place we keep them, and we bring them out on the City of Refuge. Or they come by and pick them up and
periodically,
take them periodically. But it's just something small we can do. And every little bit helps to send people to school and get educated.
Yeah.
So, learning a lot here in my first couple of months. So that was one of the cool things. Two of the cool things I learned about missions, and we'll talk about more of that as we come. So, time comes.
Yeah, our church has got a pretty cool history of like being benefiting the world. Not a lot of churches can say that. So we've got a long history of doing that.
Yeah.
We have new COVID stuff to talk about.
Yes, let's give some COVID updates.
We do, yeah. So the overarching thing, the state of Oregon right now has split the COVID response up into tiers of severity. So low, medium, high, and extreme. And for a little while
Which
now...
feels a little extreme. Pun intended.
For a while now, we've been in the extreme category. And just this last week or the week before, pretty recently, we dropped down to the high category, so tier 3. Which doesn't change much for us here. It has a direct impact right now, though, because the two primary considerations are social distancing and mask wearing, both of which are things that we're continuing to implement here at the church. Masks are mandatory and social distancing is mandatory. But the implementation of the social distancing, the way that they do that for indoor gatherings is they put a limit on the rooms and how many people can be in a room. So currently it's either 25% of the room's capacity or under tier 3, 150 people, whichever is lower. And for us right now, the 25% of the room's capacity is the lower number. Mathematically, it works out to like 135, I think. So we've got, I think, 120 chairs in the sanctuary, 125.
Yeah, I think we did 125,
something like that, to help make sure that we stay under that number. But that's our way of helping to enforce the social distancing as well as the mask wearing and things like that. For our smaller classrooms, it hasn't made a lick of difference because that's still 25% of whatever the classroom.
Right.
There's no way our classrooms are ever going to fit 150 people. So, yeah.
So what are we doing here at the church, like that is kind of helping maintain safety and honoring the the orders and.
So other than the social distancing and the mask wearing, the biggest thing is the regular cleaning routine. So our facilities guys here, Bob and Jerry, have been much more rigorous about the cleaning, what gets, wiped down. I see Bob in here all the time being remarkably meticulous about what he wipes down and what he cleans. He's doing a fantastic job. But the big thing for us is, obviously bathrooms, door handles, any high contact surfaces, any high travel surfaces, things like that. And the chairs out here in the sanctuary get sprayed down after every single service. And I think Bob does them twice during the week as well, while nobody's looking, just to make sure that we're trying to, trying to keep people as safe as we can and try to care for people the best that we can in that way. So.
Yeah, and everyone's been doing a really good job of, of wearing masks and making sure we're staying socially distanced. We're also wanting to implement, the connection part or fellowship part of what it means to be a church. When you gather as a church, it's weird just to like give an air high five or an air wave and walk away, because honestly, that's not really doing life together. It's just attending something together. Yeah. And so we're setting up out in the parking lot 10 by 20 canopy for people who want to connect. Eventually that'll kind of morph and change. We'll slowly start to implement some other more hospitable things and just more fun things. And then also outside, we also want to continue our kind of that personal touch ministry. And so we have a black canopy outside. That's just happened to be the colors. The black one on the right, as you walk out, we're going to be designating for prayer. So if people, if God's ministering to you during the service, which I know he is in different ways, but sometimes it's a response. We need to go up and receive prayer from someone in leadership or just from people who are willing to stand out and pray. We need that connection. We have that available outside. So as we're leaving, we're still asking people to go out one way, exit one way, and then on their way out, they'll see right away there's a place for people to connect outside so we can be socially distanced. And then we can have prayer there too, so people can still get the personal touch in the ministry, but also doing it in a way where you're outside, so the airflow is easier and better, and so just trying to be as best we can. I think I've said it before, trying to hit the middle number of people. Right. We know there's people on extremes on both ends, extreme caution and extreme like disregard for anything, and so we're just trying to kind of put the balance and say, no, we're going to be cautious and we're going to do things well, but we're going to continue on the life of the church, and that's a church that assembles and a church that prays for people. Yeah, and so we're wanting to make that available. And so, we did a thing here last week too, is we switched the chairs. So we did have, that's not a COVID thing, but that was just a comfort thing. But we had plastic chairs in here, and we realized that when we spray down the chairs, and we can come by and dry them, and there isn't really an effect on people's clothes and stuff like that. So we went ahead and brought back the padded chairs. Got a few like cheers when some people were like, "We have the chairs back." So.
Yeah, because in reading the regulations, the padded chairs are almost as easy to clean as the hard plastic ones. Right. So yeah.
So what are you guys doing for youth that may be different?
When we had the plastic chairs, we were wiping them down. We first started. It was kind of funny when we first reopened for in-person youth. We did it about 4 months before the church did, and we gave every kid like a pool noodle, and which ended up being a wonderful disaster, like a disaster in a good way. We're just sword fighting all the time. But the idea was like, if you can touch someone with your pool noodle, you're too close to them, and it was great. It's fun, and now like. We just have them do masks. We make sure we're sitting apart. We do youth group here in the sanctuary as a way of being able to have lots of space and play big games. And so it doesn't look all that different than our routine on Sunday morning. Afterwards, Isaiah and I spray down the chairs and that kind of cool stuff. So
Cool.
Well, again, as things change and we get more updates, we'll pivot and move with that as well. We're still wanting to, though, continue going forward with meeting in person, and we will continue to have online gathering as well.
Absolutely.
And we still know that a lot of our church family is at home, and that's great. We encourage that. If that's what you would like to do, please, though, stay connected by attending online in those services, and then also reach out to people in the church through email or through calling, but or even showing up and being 6 feet apart when you show up in an outdoor park is a great place. I know before I moved up here, I heard you guys were emphasizing that. Yeah. And it's a great option too, just because we need to see people, we need to see faces. And also, here's a little like pro tip. I don't know if we're doing pro tips, but find a shield. I actually never had them until I came here, and I said I'm gonna get a shield because I want people to see my faces, my face, not faces. I guess different faces I make, and And I can tell you, it is just it kind of brightens my spirits. I don't feel like I'm breathing my own hot breath. I also I know that if I say something, it'll actually stop. It'll hit that, and I also, I can see people and I don't know, just approach it. Maybe try a shield. Maybe that'll help. I don't know.
Kelsey just got one at Dollar Tree. She's very excited.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I kind of want to throw this challenge out there. If you are still very skeptical and cautious about being around people and coming here at the church, I would encourage, my wife and I during the lockdown, we kind of just established a firm COVID bubble where we had our small group, and we just agreed, we're just going to see each other, and we're going to give each other a heads up whenever we're going to go see someone else or go see family. And we watch services together at home and before we're meeting in person. And if being here is too intimidating or too risky for you, legitimately too risky for you, find people that you trust are being safe and are honoring restrictions in a way that make you comfortable, and see if you can get them to come over to your house on a Sunday morning and watch the service with you. And take baby steps to getting to the point where there is no replacement for in-person contact and being with other people. And so I think baby steps would be probably a good idea.
Yeah, in person doesn't have to equal in sanctuary.
Exactly.
It can be in person in your home or in person in your backyard, and put up your laptop or something, and you guys doing that. So
yeah,
I agree with you on that. I like that.
All right, we're getting ready to wrap up the show. And so for the end of this show, we usually do some sort of goofy question, but Brandon had the idea of giving a shout out to different local businesses, and this is kind of going to be a thing that's a little bit reoccurring on a podcast that we're calling the Local Lowdown. And so with restrictions kind of being lifted just a little bit and us being able to participate in local businesses on a higher level than we were a couple weeks ago, let's just go around and share what local businesses are we especially appreciative of right now.
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I got two. I told you guys I was going to do one, but I'll just do two today. I can do that. But one of the podcasts we asked for the funny kind of lighthearted end, what was one thing that you think is overrated but everyone else loves? And I said Starbucks. And I go there and I buy coffee from there because they're convenient. But after I said that at the podcast, I thought, what can I do for a local business who might be struggling or just can't compete even with all of the shutdowns and all of that? And so I saw Java Generations, which is just down Hayden Bridge past Pioneer. And I drove by that one day and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna stop in, I'm gonna get my latte from there today. And I pulled in and there's a young lady, she seems to be working there every Tuesday or Monday that I've gone through, usually just once a week, and I've gone through. And I wanted to say, hey, you know what, there's a coffee hut, and I wanted to go through, and so they've been the prices are cheaper than Starbucks, and so if I continue to go there, I'd probably save a lot of money getting my coffee there. But Java Generations on Hayden Bridge, maybe on your way to church, if you're coming to in-person gatherings, maybe on Sunday, stop by and get a coffee and
bombard them with business.
Just this is our community, right? If I come here and you guys are welcoming me, we got to own our community and support our local businesses. The other one is the Craftsman Barbershop. I've been going there to Zach. Shout out to Zach. I don't know if he'll ever listen to this, but one of these days I'm going to have to tell him I mentioned him on our podcast. But he was telling me about right down there in the kind of the newer part of Old Town, Main Street in Springfield, right across from Planktown, and some of those new businesses that are coming into that downtown area. And he was just saying, man, this place used to just be hopping, and for a while we had to shut down, and it's kind of hard for us. We're not much different than other people. People need haircuts and those things, and so it was good. I talked to him for a while, and they have been hit by this and been affected, and so I just wanted to just mention him. And I don't know where you guys are getting your haircuts, if you still are cutting your hair or whatever, but try a couple local. They're doing their best, and it's weird too, because barbershops and hair places, they're always sanitary, beyond even the CDC recommendations. So my sister does hair in Nevada, and she's like, we already do more than what they ask. So so they're safe, so don't worry, get a haircut. What about you, Daniel?
I'm going next. This is no secret, anybody who's paid attention, but I love the Washburn Cafe downtown on Main Street in Springfield. Charlie and Derek and Mindy that run the place are all friends of mine and have been for a long time. And It's a cool place. They do a lot of coffee, but they do food too, and their food's pretty good.
Food is bomb.
Yeah, I will throw this out there. They have the best chicken sandwich out of any place in town that I've tried.
Okay.
So,
All right.
yeah, and they along
They have
with,
like homemade toaster strudels there.
They-
They make the dough and
Yep.
put the jam in there.
Ooh.
Oh, so good.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's
That
right.
sounds really good.
So it's a cool place. It's a funky little place down there. I love going. Go ahead and give them some business. Charlie, periodically texts me throughout the lockdown. He was like, "Yep, we're struggling right now. Yep, we're struggling." And this last week or so, they've been seeing a lot of folks come through. It's been really encouraging.
Good.
So
I love that. I'm going to say Flashback Grill is on 42nd and Main Street. It's a local business, and it's a diner, and you go in there, and the aesthetic's really cool. Like, I know that it's kind of a cliche to have like a 50s themed diner whenever you go in somewhere, but like this one, each booth is dedicated to a different decade of pop culture, and so there's like different posters and albums and all that kind of stuff, and food's really good. And went there with my buddy Ryan Cole and my wife after church on Sunday, and it was just sitting down in the booth, talking with the waitress, like trying to remember how to do human interactions.
Yeah.
And like she walked up to me and we were just silent. We're like, what do we do at this part? Like, so that was awesome. My wife and I have talked about this a few times, but I don't know if you've noticed this, but there is a lot more businesses for lease signs up, like all over town, more than I've ever seen in my life. And it is so important to, like, if you have the resources to support a local business, nothing against Sherry's or Denny's, but don't go to IHOP, like go to Flashback, go to Busy Bee, go to Finn's. Like, there are local diners with great prices and great food that need that support.
yeah,
Good.
yeah.
All right, that's our little local support section. Daniel, go ahead and finish us off with another amazing reading from the book of Philippians.
One of these days, I got to start bringing my own Bible to do this. I keep borrowing from you. And
It's all right.
I've got many. So, all right. Philippians chapter 3, starting in verse 17 and going through verse 1 of chapter 4. Brothers and sisters, join in imitating me and observe those who live according to the example you have in us. For many live as enemies of the cross of Christ. I have often told you of them, and now I tell you even with tears. Their end is destruction. Their God is the belly, and their glory is in their shame. Their minds are set on earthly things. But our citizenship is in heaven, and it is from there that we are expecting a Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. He will transform the body of our humiliation, that it may be conformed to the body of his glory, by the power that also enables him to make all things subject to himself. Therefore, my brothers and sisters, whom I love and long for, my joy and crown, stand firm in the Lord in this way, my beloved.
Amen.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll see you guys next week.
Have a great day.
All right.